I guess on the note of like culture war stuff, I'd love to show you the next bit of this video where he then goes on to talk about like wokeism and the culture war side of what's gone wrong with the left. And if you're interested, I'd love to see your response.
Yeah, let's watch
to that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So yeah, the next he's gonna go race and gender, and then he's gonna move on to wokeism. And when I watched this the first time, I was like, yes, because let me say that like so much of my perspective and how I've come to the positions I've come to is because of the time I spent in academia, where a lot of the cultural left that we know today got its in the state it's in because of liberal intellectuals. Okay, the culture of academia like filtered its way down into the American political left, and what we are culturally on the left now is a reflection of academia. And as somebody who was there for 16 years, trust me when I tell you that couldn't be more true.
Your belief in some leftist positions or problems in the world,
but their solutions to them tend to reflect their own class position.
Yeah.
So let's take the issue of race or gender.
Part.
Sure.
You're very serious about racism. You're a college-educated person of color or a woman, and you're very serious about gender. You're going to articulate gender issues or race issues the way you experience them. This is just sociology 101, right? I mean, and so if you're not a working class person or not in the workplace yourself, the way you experience race is going to be different because you are a aspirant college professor or a tech engineer or something like that. You may be well-intentioned, but you may pose the problem of race, gender, sexuality, but your solutions to those problems are going to be reflective of your place in the world. And that's why, we talk about identity politics a lot, and maybe in this interview we will. It's not that the left says you shouldn't take race seriously. It says that the way race is experienced by working class brown and black people is very different from the way it's experienced by tenured college professors or small business owners or something like that. That's the difference between a left that takes up social issues when it's rooted in the lives of working people and a left that takes up social issues when it's rooted in the aspirations and the frustrations of the professional class.
Is that your critique of identity politics generally? Because I've heard you speak about this before, and you're a critic. I mean, you use the phrase wokeism or woke, which is, that is such a contested word, and it's become a slur on the right that I often find it not useful for me. Yeah. But why do you use it? And is that what it's referring to? Is specifically the racial experience of this sort of like upper intellectual class?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that woke is kind of meaningless now because it's just been taken over by the right, and they use it to refer to any claims around race or gender or something like that, and even economic demands. But the reason they're effective is that there was something real there. Something actually was taking over identity politics in the last 4 or 5 years. Because you have to ask, why does the right think it can use this word as a slur? It doesn't use trade unions as a slur. It doesn't use workers' demands as a slur. It uses woke as a slur. And the reason is something did happen in identity politics. I look at wokery as a kind of a mutation within identity politics. So let's define all these terms.
Sure, please.
Look, the socialists for 100 years were not only sensitive to race and gender struggles, they led the movements around. All the anti-racist movements in the United States after the 1920s were all led by socialists. All in the anti-racist leaders in the CIO were all black, and they were all coming out of or orbiting around the Communist Party. Or they'd been educated by.
What about the Southern Civil Rights movement? The Martin Luther King movement.
They were all socialists. They were all old lefties. They were all A. Philip Randolph was a Marxist.
Right.
Bayard Rustin was a Marxist. They made this biopic of him. They barely mention it. It all centers on the fact that he's gay, but he was never closeted about his sexuality. They completely ignored the fact that he was the last of the great socialists. In the United. Martin Luther King was a socialist. Everybody around the SCLC was a socialist. It was the old left. The left led the movement for racial equality in this country. So it's kind of ridiculous to say that Marxists don't take race seriously. It's kind of ridiculous. It's what the current college-educated left says to distance itself from that very tradition and to calumniate that tradition. The point is, so Marxists always were in the forefront of these struggles, but they were always contemptuous of what today we call identity politics. Well, why?
Yeah, what do you mean by identity politics?
Identity politics is the vision of race or the vision of, say, gender, social issues that reflects elite views or solutions to the problem of race. So let's just stick with race or gender. The identitarian conception of race focuses overwhelmingly or almost exclusively on this thing called discrimination. Now, discrimination is real, and it affects all Black and brown people. And what it really is, whether or not the technical definition of discrimination is, do you get a job that's reflective of the actual skills and the actual abilities you have? And either you're not allowed to have the job at all, or you paid less, the glass ceiling situation.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is we get rid of discrimination, you get racial justice. But now, for a lot of women and for a lot of people of color, the issue isn't that they're getting inadequately paid for the job they're doing, or that they didn't get the job for which they have the skills. The issue is, even if they fully get paid for the job they're doing, it's going to be a shit wage. Mm-hmm. So if you get a job at Walmart and you get exactly the wage that a white worker is getting or a male is getting, you don't have a living wage.
Yeah.
Or if you don't get the job at all, fine. Let's at that section of the labor market where you're applying for jobs, the other job that you do get, where you're not discriminated against, is still going to be a shit job. So you have two visions of jobs now. One is the upwardly mobile section of women and people of color who are in fact experiencing a glass ceiling and who are maybe only getting 80 to 90% of what their white male compatriots are getting. For them, what they're trying to get is the full value of their skills, the full value of their abilities. And they see discrimination as something that is blocking their acquiring the full value. So they have no problem with their position in the class structure.
Yeah.
What they want is to get the full returns for that position in the class structure.
Mm-hmm.
But for a working class woman or a working class person of color, if you take away discrimination, they're still screwed.
Yeah.
So their battle is not against discrimination. It's for jobs themselves. It's for social services. If you're an upwardly mobile person, you probably got a pretty good health plan for yourself. For about 40 or 50% of the American working class, they get no health plan.
Yeah.
For them, they need socialized medicine. So there's no such thing as race politics. There's race politics and gender politics as envisioned by elites. And then there's the kind of race and gender politics that's been articulated by and fought for by labor parties and by the working class movement. When we use the word, people like myself on the left, identity politics, we are referring not to the struggle for race justice, because we've always fought for that. What we're referring to is the way in which race justice is narrowed down by elites to simply fight for the concerns of the wealthy women, wealthy people of color. And who in their right minds should be supportive of that, unless you belong to that class?
Well, thank you for that.
All right. Thoughts?
I love what he said. I guess my thought is, how do we get back to the old left? How do we get back to the old left that was the driving force behind the overall better economic situation that existed, pre-1970? And again, it wasn't great for everybody, but it was great for a much larger portion of the population. And then how do we get back to that left that still is truly concerned about everybody's welfare, be it Black, brown, male, female, whatever your sexual orientation is? And that's the frustrating part for me, is because I feel like sometimes I get caught up in the new left, and because I see what happened to people I knew growing up, people I knew in my past work life. I've got my own experiences with just being law enforcement. Let's take law enforcement, right? I've got there was a day in my life, not just a day, but a span of time where I was a, avid consumer of marijuana. And I can think of 5 different times where I was pulled over having just finished smoking or while smoking, and the way it was handled completely different based on either A, the 2 times I was by myself, and I promise you they could smell it. One time with my brother, literally caught us with it on us. Wasn't a large amount. Literally, we weren't going to be distributing it, literally just consuming it for ourselves. And the 2 times where I was with black men, and both of the times that I was with black men are the only 2 times where more than a single cop car was called to the scene. I lost more than 20 minutes of time of my day, right? The exception to that would be the time with my brother, and that's literally because they caught it with us on us. We were going through a roadblock, and there were so many more things going on besides just the weed, right? I literally didn't have my driver's license on me. My Jeep that I had at the time wasn't registered with a good registration plate in Indiana yet, and it was expired here in this area. We were still let go in the end without any extra effort, without more police officers being brought to the scene. So I guess, it really, I want to get back to the left that he was talking about, because that's the left that I think really moves mountains.
Yeah. I think, when I think about your question of how do we get back to that, I feel like the first order of business is to wake up our friends who think they're on the left, but are too bogged down in all these culture war issues and too, rightfully upset about the bigotry and all that stuff. Because again, it's true, it's real, it exists, right? But we also need to see that they're just playing into the hands of the elite. They're letting that weapon, that the elites are wielding work against them, right? And they're keeping us on the left divided. So going back to what Vivek was saying, is like your working class left, and then you've got your professional class left. So to me, the order of business is to have the working class left wake up the fucking PMCs, that's what they're called in the literature, professional managerial class, to wake those people up. That's the world I came from. It's the PMC world, right? Those upwardly mobile lefties, right? Wake them up and say, guys, if you want shit to change, you need to find solidarity with your working class lefty bros and sisters, like you've got to make yourself uncomfortable. And you know what? I can actually give you an example that I witnessed in academia of how there is that class divide even in the left. So a coworker of mine was interested in unionizing our workplace, right? And my workplace was filled with, that PMC folks, all the, intellectuals, those who were on the tenure track, they were in that professor, I guess, class of people, right? But then you also had your staff workers who were the paraprofessionals who were degreed people, but made a shit ton money less than those PMCs, right? And then even, we had janitorial workers and all that stuff. So there was a unionization effort, right? And when he approached one of my colleagues who was in the PMC class about joining the union, he literally said, no, because the needs that professors have are different from basically the peons. Like the professors have a different set of needs than those on the bottom, is basically what he was saying, and didn't want to join the union as a result. Like he literally thought that he was something special, way more special than the needs of like the paraprofessionals on the bottom who were making shit wages and were constantly being cut when the budget cuts came down and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like he literally could not and would not allow himself to be amongst the peons, like there's an attitude reflected in that decision. You know what I mean? Like, let's be real. And that is like, I'm above these people. I'm better than these people. And I wouldn't dare, stoop to that is basically how it came across. And so unfortunately, like I joined the union and some others that I know joined the union, but I would have to say that most of my PMC colleagues did not.
That's tough. That's tough.
So,
I'll tell you, as I've gotten older, and especially being aware of the world we live in, especially here in the United States and the way things are going, I appreciate the union more than I ever did when I was in the union. And I wasn't in the union long, but I did work for one of the large parcel carriers that has a union. And at the time, I was frustrated and thought the union was a bad thing because I felt like, they were protecting. I was working twice as hard as somebody else that was getting away with not working to the level that we all were being asked to work. And again, this is completely the structure of capitalism that drove it more than anything. But my frustration with the union was that he was being protected, not doing any real work, and this was fucking intensive physical labor. And so that for me at the time gave me a bad taste of the union. But there were so many other benefits to it that I look back at going, yeah, that was I should have stayed. I absolutely should have stuck that out and made that a lifelong career with that company. And yeah, I tell people all the time now, especially young people that I come in contact with, if they're considering going to work for a union, I praise unions. And I don't currently work for a union. But yeah, I think their unions are a great thing. And it sucks that the professor did that, and that there is that classism that, but again, that goes back to the capitalist structure that we live in. You get to feel like you're in a better place if you're, if you don't need the union, or if you're a professor who is, whose needs are different. So
yeah, it just, that if there was anything that I was always really tuned into, like my whole time there, that just irked my last nerve on a daily basis, it was the classism that I witnessed every single day. And John, that was just one example, like one blatant example of the classism. It happened in so many other ways in other areas. And so, yeah, when I think about how to get back to it, it's waking up these snotty ass PMCs and being like, and just letting them know, look, your interests are closer to mine. You're more likely to find yourself in my class than you are the class above you. So get with the program and like join with the lower classes, if you will, and see that your economic and material interests are way more aligned with them.
Yeah. I wish somehow we could also do that for the working class on the right, and help them see that we're being divided on things that aren't going to help us in the long run. It's going to continue to hurt all of us in the working class. And, because I know they're caught up in it just as much as those of us on the left. And it sucks because we're playing we're all playing our part in the game that we don't want to be playing in.
I highly recommend that you go and check out this whole interview, because you can visibly see Adam getting uncomfortable with the things that Vivek is saying, because again, what Vivek is saying it's true. Everything he's saying is true, but it's a truth and a voice that the left has not had for a very long time, right? And so Adam is very much, you can tell he's like, I would probably guess that he would be a PMC, lefty or liberal or whatever, but PMC for sure, professional managerial class. And so it was just interesting watching him get uncomfortable and push back. Like you could just see him like processing in real time, like, oh, wow, yeah, that totally makes sense. But shit, yikes, kind of goes against the, like, you know,
what we've been
conditioning I've been undergoing, you know, like.
Yep. I mean, it's so, you know, and that's part of the deconstruction that we have to do.
Yes, there's the answer to your question, deconstruction.
Yeah, right. And I know most people think of deconstruction and associate it with religious deconstruction, but for me, it's deconstruction around, you know, the American mythology and the American exceptionalism. Also, it's deconstruction from capitalism. You know what I mean? And these things are, and that whole identity politics battle is another tool of the capitalists.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done a really good job of, you know, conditioning us all to be, you know, to make that our fight instead of the real fight of being class.
Yeah. I think another like super important task is getting out of your echo chambers, like your media echo chambers. Like I was saying earlier, like it's a real thing. Like it's so real. And I know like as someone who's like a highly empathetic person who couldn't have been more, I guess you could say woke, DEI or whatever, just a few years ago. You're living in your echo chambers and you're receiving these messages that just constantly like affirm and reaffirm like all your biases, right? And so that can feel good, right? And the idea of like getting out of your echo chamber and making it a point to like listen to another person's point of view, you know, whether it's like political, social, religious, whatever, it's very hard and it's very daunting to think about. But I have been intentionally doing that. Well, I say intentionally, but I guess I should be honest and say what has led me to get out of my echo chamber was, you know, Charlie Kirk's death and watching the right just sort of implode over it. And so that was the hook. That was the thing that drew me over to like, oh, what's Candace saying today? What's Tucker saying today? What's Fox News saying about, you know, like what's the narrative in this particular camp, right? And so just being interested in that, I, as a side effect, was exposed to like, you know, things and perspectives that I hadn't really considered, right? That hasn't changed my values or like my morals or my principles really. I just come to them, I feel like in a much more informed way now, and also am able to have more sympathy and empathy, I think, for the other side in ways that I couldn't have imagined just 4 years ago. You know what I mean? So that's my pitch. I think that that's important too, as far as like bringing the left back around to where it should be and where it was, you know, 100 years ago.